A lot of the things that, friends and family would tell me is that I am compassionate, I'm caring, I have a giving heart, and I'm very concerned about others and less of myself. And I had went to a multitude of doctors, from emergency room doctors to primary care doctors to GI doctors. I was having these headaches, I was fatigued. I just couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I just felt completely off. I was having irregular fevers just here and there, the headaches, the itchy skin, the redness, showers would bother me. And I just was extremely frustrated. She looked at me and she was like, "You need to leave right now." She said, "You need to go see my husband," who was also a hematologist. February 14th of 2015, I was diagnosed with Polycythemia Vera. And I was actually in my junior year of college. I was working 2 jobs at the time, and I was definitely feeling off. Wasn't feeling like myself, and I had went to a multitude of doctors, from emergency room doctors to primary care doctors to GI doctors. The GI doctor had told me that he was had nothing concerned, had no concern about my gut or anything as far as acid reflux or anything like that he was concerned about. But he did pull up some lab work where he was extremely concerned about my red blood cells, my hemoglobin, and my hematocrit, and my platelet count around that time. And at that point, I was actually working on a bone marrow transplant unit at Children's Hospital, which was pretty amazing, and actually is why I'm where I am today. And the numbers were extremely, extremely high, and it was very alarming. But the conversation that I brought to my primary care doctor was that, I went to my GI doctor. He was extremely concerned, and she blew me off and basically stated that I was too young and it was nothing to worry about. It was probably an infection, and she would put me on antibiotics and I should be fine, and everything should level out. So at that point, I went back to my daily routine of going to school and working as well. And then I had a car accident where I blacked out. One, that was alarming, and two, it was extremely concerning at that time for me, because it wasn't like I was deprived of sleep or this wasn't my regular routine. And so me blacking out behind the wheel was extremely concerning. So at that point, I kind of took it upon myself. I did some research within my chart, pulled some labs, and kind of got a visual of exactly what I was dealing with. At that time, I was a health unit coordinator and doing a clinical rotation for social work. So at that time, I brought those labs to the doctor, and she looked at me and she was like, "You need to leave right now." She said, "You need to go see my husband," who was also a hematologist. So one of my coworkers actually took me straight to there. He looked over my labs and he kind of gave me an idea that something is definitely going on. He wasn't quite sure of what, but he drew some labs, did a full workup, and a week later, February 14th of 2015, I was diagnosed with Polycythemia Vera. A picture of my grandmother at the time, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And it was also around the time that I was diagnosed. She was sick at the time. Her being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer was what they considered at that time a death sentence. They told her that, she had 6 months to live, but, I took it upon myself to be there for her as much as I could, even in the sense of me being in my last year of college and trying to navigate that process, and also trying to be there for my family. So even though I was having these headaches, I was fatigued, I just couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I just felt completely off. I was having irregular fevers just here and there, the headaches, the itchy skin, the redness, showers would bother me. And I just was extremely frustrated. But outside of that, I was so concerned about my grandmother at the time and being there for her. And I didn't feel as if my family was on the same accord. So I found myself overextending myself to make sure that I am there. I was there for my grandmother. And she was actually planning on retiring soon. Her eyes were yellow. And I asked her, I said, why are your eyes yellow? I said, have you been at work all day and no one told you your eyes were yellow? And we were supposed to go to a family outing. And I said, no, we're going to the emergency room. And in that hour to 2 hours of being in the emergency room, she was then diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I was told that pregnancy wasn't an option, that I shouldn't get pregnant. I shouldn't have children. It wasn't safe for me to do that. I think at the time it maybe been maybe 1 or 2 research studies that were out there, but they were very limited and didn't have a lot of information on what actually would happen if I was to have children. So I did get a second opinion at the hospital that I was at that time, and they too told me the same thing. And I also went to my hematologist at the time, who actually sat down on it. And me and my fiance at the time were having conversations with her because we were concerned about me having children, and we both were wanting to have children. And she was like totally against it. She said, no, I don't advise it. She was like so concerned. And me and my husband being faith-based people, and understanding that God has the last say, and that we need to do our due diligence and research behind that. So we actually went to IVF doctor or a reproductive specialist, and we got a second opinion. And they did share that there are some concerns with me having children, but it wasn't impossible. So we went through the IVF process. Oh, Lord. And they told us, like, hey, usually this doesn't happen for a woman on the first try. So, don't be upset if it doesn't happen for you. And put an emphasis on that at that time. So, me knowing who God is and my relationship with God, and kind of how I've always tried to align who I am with God's purpose, I just put it in his hands. So we started the IVF process, and that process was pretty amazing because I did it during COVID. So a lot of the things were done at home, and me and my husband did that process together, which was pretty amazing. He did all my shots. We went to all of the appointments, all the questions, and all the doctor's appointments, and all the things that were done for that process. And I don't think there's enough conversation around reproductive health when it comes to women who actually either have cancer or have been through chemo and radiation and things like that. There's not a lot of conversations around that there are options for us. So going through that process, of course, I was pregnant the first time. And when they did do the implantation of the embryo, 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant.
So your uterus is here. Okay. This is the lining of the uterus.
Does it look fine?
Yep, looks good.
What's so funny about being pregnant, which was I thought was eye-opening, during my pregnancy, my condition actually went dormant. So I had no signs or symptoms of polycythemia vera. All my numbers were normalized there, which I thought was pretty cool. So I would go in on a weekly basis for labs, and everything was normal throughout my pregnancy. No issues at all. No signs of stroke, no headaches. I had the normal pregnancy symptoms. So, them telling me that we couldn't have children, and then me having her, and then going through something as traumatic as a cyst rupture in the midst of being 6 weeks pregnant, in the midst of COVID, and them telling you that your child may not live through this procedure, and her actually making it to this world, is the main reason we call her Miracle. And she's every bit of that word, of her name.
You smile for daddy. Oh.
right after having Miracle, the disease actually went haywire, is what I would call it. So weeks after having her, numbers kind of went extremely high. My platelets were in the 2 millions on the weekly basis. They were also doing platelet pheresis, where they would pull the platelets out on a weekly basis. So at the top of the week, I would have platelet pheresis, and at the end of the week, I would get down to a normal range from them pulling the platelets out. But by the end of the week, I was back to 2 million. So at that point, life-threatening things could occur. And in the process of having this conversation with my hematologist at the time, he was like, "It's not really another option outside of having a bone marrow transplant." And he wanted me to understand exactly what would happen with that. So, of course, they started the process of getting me prepared for that. But mentally, I was like, I think we should probably speed it up. They felt that as well, because the platelets just continue to be in 2 million, which high dose platelets create clotting. They said that my blood was like syrup. So when they would pull it out to draw my labs to see it, it would automatically clot in the tube, which would create an issue for them figuring out if, what my labs were that week and repeating it over and over and over. I had no options at all. The options was very minimal, and that option was to have a stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant. Those two are the same. And, you know, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I wouldn't wish a bone marrow transplant on anyone, because being a woman of color, or just a person of color, one, I had no donors on the list. There were no donors at all. There was no matches. So I had my bone marrow transplant at 29 years old. Having a transplant at 29, and the uncertainties of if you will ever be able to have children. So the wonderful part about having IVF and doing that, they had already pulled eggs out and frozen them. But the uncertainties when a young woman goes through a bone marrow transplant and the fast pace. So if I hadn't had Miracle when I decided to have her, I wouldn't have had the option to freeze eggs, because there was no time to do that. So it was either have a transplant or die. Those were what my options were. And I believe that it's extremely important for women to get in front of their reproductive health early on in life, because I wouldn't have had the option to have children. Reason one, after I had my transplant, my body was thrown into menopause. So I'm in menopause now. My hormones are completely shot. I don't have a sex drive at all whatsoever. I'm 34. I have no sex drive. And that's hard being married. That's hard being a woman. It's hard for your hormones to be off just because of the moodiness, the hot flashes, the irregulars within your body. It's extremely hard. And I've done a lot of research in that aspect when it comes to, things that you can do, reproductive health, and trying to figure out what will work or what will help me.
Happy Cell Day to you. Happy Cell Day to you.
I am forever grateful that I was able to have the transplant, and I'm here to speak to you. But it's definitely stressful to be in this space now. The uncertainty, prior to me not having a transplant, knowing if I would be here or not, definitely overpowers where I am today. I'm extremely grateful that I did do the transplant, but mentally and emotionally, and my mental health has definitely been affected because of that. But I try to raise awareness and make people aware of the things that you can go through. I actually had to go on disability during my transplant. I had to go on disability, which, with a lot of corporate organizations, they actually have to, after a year, have to get rid of your role or put someone else in your role. So that happened to me. So I went on full disability, and I have not been able to get back to work. And it's because it's been one thing after another. So to be able to do what my heart desires and kind of what I feel I was born to do was to create the organizations that I've have and be able to pour into the community, because I really feel lost not doing anything at all. Yes, I am a mother, I'm a caregiver, but even still, I still have the desire to do more because I feel that my voice needs to be heard. What I've discussed within my own advocacy work and the things that I'm working on is having those uncomfortable questions. Yes, the idea and the main goal is to save your life. But what is life like after transplant? And those are the questions that I feel needs to be answered in the beginning. One, what I've done research on, I've read on, is that a lot of marriages actually end after transplant or in the midst of transplant because there's not enough information given to the family, to the loved ones in the beginning of what can happen. Um, and mental health is extremely important. Um, extremely important in the beginning of transplant. So I do believe that you should find a therapist, a counselor, or someone that can help you either get on antidepressants or be on standby to have those conversations of antidepressants, because I was on antidepressants during my transplant and it was very lonely. And they don't give you that aspect of it. When you go through this, you are extremely alone mentally because no one actually knows what you're going through outside of another patient. And you cannot go and communicate with that other patient. One, because you are immune compromised and lost a lot of friends because they basically disappeared during that process. But they don't alarm you of. And I also think that they should do a survey. Like, after you had your transplant, what did you go through? Like, what was the feelings? What can we do different? What I'm currently doing to help others in the community, not just myself. I actually just in the process of creating, I did have an organization called Invisible to the Eye, but I am now creating called Miracles Circles Hands. On that organization is to create advocacy in the community, not just for those with invisible diseases, but also for seniors in the community as well. I'm advocating for those who cannot advocate for themselves. And I did that off of my daughter's name. One, because she's been our miracle. And the circle hands is because when you're advocating for people, you're going out in the community and you're connecting those resources, and you guys will connect those hands to be able to provide the resources that it needs to the patients or the loved one or whomever I will be working with. And to be able to do that, we all have to, one, create the space where that person can be vulnerable, can actually tell you exactly what they're going through and going on. And it's a lot of people that are being taken advantage of because of their illnesses, not just for their illnesses, but also of their age. And I want to be the person to be able to get in front of that and be able to help families and loved ones and those in the community that you aren't alone and that there is someone that care, and there are resources out here to actually that can help you navigate. My hope is being able to wake up another day. My hope is to be able to pour back into people. My hope is to be able to do what my father was able to do for me, which was give me another life, which I am forever grateful for. And I'm hoping that, what I use on a daily basis is, my saying is, the more grateful your heart, the more beauty you see. So I feel that's extremely important. I use that every day. I'm grateful to be here, even though I have to deal with different things. I'm grateful. And the more grateful I am, the bigger my heart, the more I can serve my community. I can be of service to others. And I feel like, a lot of people need to understand there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, there are hills and valleys, but I think life in general brings you those. So why not feel as if you have came to a mountaintop and actually have won that battle, have triumphed? I was told multiple times that I would not be here.